Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root, where we dive deep into understanding and addressing root causes of chronic health issues so you can help and find healing inside and out, now and forever. Hello, and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root. I'm Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective. Welcome to the podcast. So before I dive into today's topic here, in case you don't actually watch the podcast and you just listen, which is totally fine, and I know that is the vast majority of people, but if you are watching, you will notice there's a little bit of a different setup today. And if you are listening, so I've got like real headphones on today. I've got like my real mic and mic stand all set up, and just a little bit of backstory here. And if you are also a business owner, you will totally understand this whole story. So when we went to first launch this podcast, well over a year and a half ago now, I got this nice podcast recording equipment, microphone, stand, headphones, like all that kind of stuff. And the goal was to be super legit going into this. And you'll notice if you've ever seen our podcast cover, like the image of that, it is like a legit, like I have the headphones on, I have the mic and mic stand all set up, and for the life of us, we cannot figure out how to get everything set up. I am not a tech person by any means. I have someone, and she's been on the podcast, Andy, before, and she is our like behind the scenes, like she does all of our tech stuff. She does like all of like the creative imagery. Like she just like our behind the scenes guru, all around kind of jack of all trades kind of person, Jill of all trades kind of person. And I mean, and I'm telling you, I mean, I've sent this mic back to the manufacturer a couple times. I've on the phone with them, troubleshooted. I mean, I thought we came down to the point where we were like, all right, well, it's my old computer. It's just not set up for this. And so I got a new computer because I had to earlier this year. And I was like, amazing. It's going to work now. And it did not. Even Annie was here in Arizona with me earlier this year for like a whole month, a little bit over than that. And I mean, we troubleshooted. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of time we spent trying to troubleshoot this. And I just like, it came back around here pretty recently, and I just like put things on hold because I just don't have the capacity to deal with it, especially tech stuff. My level of frustration goes up very, very quickly. So if I can't figure something out, and once again, we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort. I mean, days of my life trying to figure this out without any success. And there was just one day last week where I brought it up again, and I was like, Andy, can you just like look into this again? I feel like we're just missing something. And we found something totally new to try, got it over the weekend, and it worked. Just like magically worked. All of a sudden, everything works. So I feel super official now because everything actually works. All the equipment that I wanted to use, just like the higher level of equipment that I wanted to use going into this, it is all set up. We are good to go. And it makes me so excited. So I'm really excited. We should have, and we've done things on the back end and editing. And by we, I mean Andy, to help with the audio quality and to help with some different things to make sure that it sounded the best that we could do with the resources that we had. And I'm also so excited that officially this all works and we're good to go, especially as we're getting ready to, we're going to be shifting a couple things on the podcast. It's not going away. And we're just going to be shifting a few things and doing just some different things with the podcast that I think is going to be super cool. We're going to start bringing some guests on. If you didn't see our poll that we put out, maybe by the time this comes out, maybe 2 weeks previously, or about a week and a half, if you have any guests you would like to see on this podcast, please let us know. We have a list already. We've had a running list for a while now, and we're continuing to take suggestions. If there's just people that you feel like would be really great, that you just would love us to have a conversation with, yeah, of course, like please let us know. You can DM us, you can email us, info@trifectacollective.net.
we'd love to hear. We want to make this something that you want to listen to. So if you have thoughts or suggestions, we are totally open to any and all of that. We also have a list of topics that we are really excited about. And by list, I mean, we've got 25, 30 plus topics that we're working on finding really good quality people. And that's the goal for us. We don't want to have people on just to interview people, just to put out a podcast for the sake of it, because I can obviously record by myself and be totally fine. And I love the idea of having guests on. A lot of times for selfish reasons, because they're people that I want to talk to. These are topics that I want to dive deeper into that are not my area of expertise. And maybe I have some knowledge about some of these things, because I absolutely do. And I'm not an expert in absolutely everything when it comes to health and wellness related. And so there's so much value to bring other people on for me to learn, but also for all of you to also be able to learn and dive deeper. And just a few things we've got kind of in the works. We want to bring someone on to talk about holistic pet care. And what does that really look like? A holistic dentist, a financial advisor. And I actually have a couple of people on my list for financial health. Is kind of the broad spectrum category. And there's one person I'm super excited to hopefully be able to have her on and be able to chat with her. There's someone, an HRT expert on our list, a supplement expert is also on our list. So we just have different people that we'd love to have on that are very relevant topics for women interested in health and wellness that, are adjacent topics that are adjacent to what we work with and or would be a very good value in addition. There's a couple of different types of people in, I'm going to broad spectrum say therapy space, therapist ? But therapy adjacent spaces that I think would be a really good fit to have on here that I have maybe heard on other podcasts, or I know a little bit about them. Maybe I'm in some of the same groups as them. So there's just a lot of different people that I'd love to bring on and be able to share them as a human, and also all of their expertise and knowledge about these fabulous topics that are just relevant for, I think, a lot of us. I also want to bring someone on because we get this a lot, pediatric health. And that is we don't work with people under the age of 16. It's very different. And it's not something I feel comfortable with because I'm not well versed. I'm not well trained in it. I can read labs kind of, but as far as supplements, dosing, bigger protocols, nutritional recommendation, it is not my area of expertise, and it is not something that anyone in our practice right now feels very comfortable with. It is something that I've looked at previously at trying to bring someone on, and there's not a lot. There's not a whole lot of people. So I have a couple names on my list, and I just need to vet them a little bit more before deciding on who. And I'm obviously totally okay with bringing a handful of these people on too, to dive deeper into these areas. So yeah, if you have anyone that you'd love to see on, please let us know, and we will do our best to try and put them on our list and work on getting them on here. So today's topic is something that I haven't talked about in quite some time here. And there's been a resurgence of this, and that is on the topic of psychedelics, specifically microdosing. And we did an episode a while back on microdosing, and we talked about a lot of the basics. We talked about a lot of our personal experiences and some different things, considerations to take into account. And there probably will be some overlap from this episode. I honestly don't remember everything that we talked about. My memory's not quite that good. It's pretty good, but not quite that good. And so in this kind of resurgence of interest in this piece of the puzzle or side of health, I wanted to revisit just some common questions that I get a lot when I meet with people who are interested in learning more about this, potentially working with me specifically around microdosing and the psychedelic space. And so I just kind of want to go through some of this. So before I dive in, I'm going to do a disclaimer. I'm going to do a couple disclaimers here for our protection, essentially. Anytime you stop, start, or switch up any sort of supplements and or medications, please consult your physician ahead of time. This is not medical advice. This is strictly for educational purposes. We do not condone and or solicit the use of anything that is not legal here or abroad. Please use your own discernment, and we do not condone anything that is not legal. Okay, so disclaimers out of the way. So let's talk about this. So when we talk about microdosing, specifically in the psychedelic space, so there's a few different ways that you can do this, and there's a few different products that you can do this. So the one that we specifically work with within our practice, and this is me, I lead this. I'm the one that facilitates this. I'm the one that I have a group, a microdosing group. If you're ever interested, you do need to have a consult with me, a specific microdosing consult with me before you can join that group, because it is not appropriate for everyone. And I am very aware of that. And I am a hardcore believer in that. So I do require that consult with me, unless you're a current client, in which case, if you're one of my one-on-one clients, we can talk about it in our sessions. And if you don't work with me directly on a pretty regular basis, we need to have a consult first. So we specifically use psilocybin, which is mushrooms, specifically magic mushrooms, if we want to call it that. And the other, I'd say, pretty popular product substance that many people will microdose with is LSD. LSD is synthetic. I have microdosed with LSD before. It is not my medicine. And when you start in this space, and I'm going to share a little bit more about this, because how I talk about this is a little bit different than I hear many other people talking about this, specifically in the microdosing space. And so and there's a larger question that's going to come up here pretty commonly. So LSD is not something I personally work with. I have taken, I think it was a part of one of my courses I have taken. And to be honest, I didn't dive super deep into it just because of my personal experience. I just didn't really resonate with it. I tend to resonate more with plants that come from the ground, from the earth. And I'll say the exception, it would be MDMA. MDMA holds a special place in my heart, but it is not something that we microdose. It is not something that is recommended for microdosing. And it is not something, by and large, like I would recommend for microdosing anywhere across the board. I have yet to see that be a thing. And it really has to do with how it works within the brain. And I think when I talk a little bit more about psilocybin, you'll see why psilocybin can be a very valuable tool for many when it comes to microdosing. So we specifically use psilocybin. And first and foremost, if you're going to do this, please use a quality product. So in most of the US, please double check your laws. Once again, this is not legal advice. We do not condone the use, purchase, anything when it comes to illegal substances. In most places, it is legal to buy spores, to be able to grow your own, which is obviously on the table. I have never tried it. I have friends who do. It is not the easiest thing and requires a lot of specific work. Not that it's terribly challenging. And I think if you want to do it really right, there's a lot to learn. And it's just not something, I've never had a space either where I felt really good about doing it. And I've seen other people setups and I'm like, this is not for me at this moment. So I have sources available that I very much trust, that I use regularly, that I know the quality is really good, all that kind of stuff. Quality matters though. There's also dozens of different strands of mushrooms for reference. And they all work a little bit differently. And just because if you microdose with one strand and don't do well with it, doesn't mean you're not going to do well with any of them. And there are certain considerations to take into account. You know, a lot of people will microdose with a strand or even do larger journey work as a starting point with a strand called Golden Teachers. Very common, pretty low level. It's fine. I think you typically have to do a little bit more, in my opinion, for most people to get the same impact as you do with other strands. That being said, there's also strands I do not recommend typically microdosing with. Penis envy, yes, that is a real name, is one I don't typically love to microdose. Now, I think it can be good, especially for people who are a little bit more experienced, to do larger journey work with it. And there's a lot of reasons for it. And I have done larger journey work. I have microdosed with it. And they're all just different. Some are a little bit more body, some are a little bit more head, some are a little bit more balanced. You know, when we think about larger journey work, you know, for someone's first couple journeys, I think there is value in picking a strand that allows for a more gentle kind of intake into the experience. Penis envy, by and large, for me at least, and this is pretty common feedback that I've also heard from a lot of my friends and different people who have done this kind of work, is it's a little aggressive. For me, instead of like being like gently trotting into your experience, it's like your body slammed into your journey, which is fine, especially when you're a little bit more experienced and you can like ride that wave and you have some experience in riding kind of through that. But it can feel a little aggressive when you're first getting started. And so it may not be the most appropriate starting off with. And or microdosing. Microdosing is totally different, so it does not have quite that same effect. And I also just don't love it. It does feel a little aggressive for me from a microdosing standpoint. So quality matters for sure. And I'll also say, you know, for me, this is something I always talk to clients about, is especially, so I typically I get whole mushrooms and then I grind them up and then I use them as microdosing. Some people don't do that. Some people do capsules. I do not love capsules. I really like to be able to decide what my dosage is going to be for any given day. And the capsules usually come in standard dosages, either 0.05 or 0.1, and don't really allow for the small manipulations and changes. You can also, a lot of the capsules are pre-stacked with different things that can be a variety of things. For me personally, I like to stack, meaning I like to microdose, not only use my microdose, but also use some other things with it that enhance the properties. For me, that is lion's mane because it increases the neurological benefits. One of the big neurological benefits that we can get from microdosing is increasing the brain's capacity to make new neural pathways, aka it makes it a little bit easier to do new things and to be able to incorporate those habits more consistently, because our brain these neurons in our brain start to light up more and they can make new connections faster, which means that we can change pathways easier. So if you're someone, for example, that has a really hard time, and I hear this from a lot of my ADHD kind of clients, that I have a really hard time starting new habits and sticking with them. And it's like I fail at everything. Well, I think there's a couple different pieces to that. And microdosing can be a very, very valuable tool to be able to assist with that. And you're like, I want to be able to work out and be able to go to the gym consistently and feel good with that. Well, great. Well, maybe let's try microdosing. One, it's going to increase that new neural pathway connection. It can also increase your physical capacity. And some people will notice they feel stronger. They feel more energized. The energy thing's a big one for a lot of people. But I'd say for me, even like when I'm working out with these, and I'm microdosing, I will often feel stronger. I will feel like I can do a little bit more in my workouts. Now I need to be mindful of my total situation, my hormones, my sleep, my nutrition, like, all of the other things too. And I do have some increased physical capacity, which also feels really good going into a workout of some sort. So it can be very beneficial from that standpoint. It can also, and I also want to say it's not a magic pill. It's not going to be like you start working out and just like, bam, all of a sudden you love working out and like it's instilled. It still takes some time and consistency to build these habits. I view the microdosing as almost like an accelerator. So let's say it would take you 60 days to really consistently be in a new habit. Well, with microdosing, maybe it only takes 30 to 45 days. So instead of 8 weeks, maybe 4 to 6. So it can speed things up a little bit. Let's say we're trying to work on mindset, some sort of default program that we have going on. And, like for example, let's say earning money is hard. Getting money is hard. Okay, so maybe we want to rewire that and we want to shift things up and be like, no, making money can be pretty easy. And it doesn't have to be as hard or as complicated as we often make it. So maybe we're shifting that pattern. Maybe we're doing some brain retraining work and we're doing some different things when it comes to money, financial health, a relationship with money, with finances, and different things like that. And then we start incorporating microdosing. It might just feel a little easier working through that program. Once again, maybe it's a little bit of a speed up. Maybe it just doesn't feel quite as hard. And these are things that microdosing can do. It's not a magic pill. It's not a magic fix for anything. And it can be a really great tool for many, many things. So a big question I do get is, what is it used for? So I just talked about a few examples, and let me talk about a few more here. So overall mood. I'm going to include mood, low mood, maybe not the best moods, and that can be from a variety of factors here. I'm also going to throw in anxiety and depression. And there's not a ton of studies on microdosing at this moment. And I can tell you from not only from the limited studies that are out there, but also from personal experience and also experience working with dozens and dozens of clients in this space, that it makes a difference for all of them, for mood elevation, for depression, for anxiety. There's a new study that came out pretty recently, and this has to do with larger journey work. And I think it's going to still be some time until we see some more conclusive and really well-run studies when it comes to the microdosing space. And there can be some extrapolations from and larger journey work and microdosing. It is totally different, and there is some crossover. So in this newer study, it showed the use of psychedelics. And I believe in this study, if I remember correctly, it was specifically psilocybin that was used. And there is a synthetic form of psilocybin that is often used in these studies. It's not just the mushrooms, so they kind of extract the psilocybin itself to make it a little bit more consistent so they can get better data on a lot of this. And I also think there's a big difference between taking something synthetic and taking something from the earth. And while it's not as controllable, the levels of psilocybin in these mushrooms, and there is a difference in the strands, and this is a big difference in the strands. If we go look at golden teachers, lower levels of psilocybin versus Penis envy, much higher levels. And there are strengths to these mushrooms. And so this study looked at depression, and it looked at depression using psilocybin, and once again, it was larger journey work versus medication. Psilocybin blew it out of the park. Not only short term, but even 5 years later, the depression was still much, continued to stay much lower, and or was gone still, which is wild. Exercise, specifically strength training, has shown similar benefits, especially short term, in that strength training specifically has been shown for mild to moderate depression to be just as, if not more effective than the medication available on the market. Yet, when you go to your doctor, most of us still only hear it is in your head, you have depression, you have anxiety, here's a medication. And these medications have a lot of side effects. Now, this is not to shame the medication, that if you need to be on this, especially short term, and if you feel like that is the right decision for you, do it. Go for it. Make sure you do your research first. I can tell you from personal experience, and then also, I mean, this is one of the more common medications that people want to get off of when they work with us, and it is something that we absolutely can support and assist with in conjunction with their prescribing physician to come up with a plan. And the reason being is many of these medications can have significant rebound side effects in coming off, even if you wean off. And I'll tell you that for many clients that we've worked with and helping them wean off of these medications, psilocybin, microdosing in general, is something I often bring up because it can be a really valuable tool to help limit some of these side effects. And I'll tell you, the brain zaps for most of us are the worst side effect. I was on these medications for a decade, and working out got me off of them and helped me stay off of them. I still had depression and anxiety. And when I started microdosing and started my journey in the plant medicine space, this made a massive difference. Holy moly, just massive difference. And I can tell you, I did cold turkey. I came off of all of my medications cold turkey. I've also been on just about every medication that is on the market. Any of the newer ones, I've been off of all of these meds for almost a decade now. Or maybe a little over a decade at this point. Or we're probably coming right at a decade. So I think I get it. I mean, and I've had all of this. I mean, man, I went on a few of these and I go, I am even more suicidal than I was before starting this. And I mean, I've also had the same impacts from birth control. And I was on a lot of different birth control pills, and a lot of them impacted my mental and emotional health significantly. So these are just things to think about. And microdosing can be a very valuable support when it comes to mental and emotional health and weaning off of some of these medications. If you deal with kind of like low to moderate anxiety and or depression, just like fatigue issues, even sometimes, like this can be really a good tool. It is, once again, it's not a fix. It's not a Band-Aid. It is a tool that when used appropriately can have really massive benefits. Another big thing I often use microdosing with for clients is hormonal issues. And I'm going to include two big ones, but it is not exclusive to just these two. First one is a big one, PMDD. In women we work with who have PMDD, and I'm talking, I mean, you feel like you are a totally different person for this, the second half of your cycle, 7 to 14 days. We'll say 7 to 14 days before the start of your period. If you are just a totally different person, microdosing can be a valuable tool. And SSRIs are often recommended for women who have PMDD other than birth control, because birth control is highly recommended, which can make things worse, by the way. And then an SSRI is often the second line of defense. And some of that depends on your physician and who you talk to. And both can be supportive for some. They are also Band-Aids. And I think microdosing can be a natural way to support while also looking at the bigger picture. And we have people that work with us who do the microdosing, whether that's right off the bat or they wait a bit and do some of the larger work that we're starting to do and looking at these underlying bigger root causes and starting to address those. Sometimes it's really beneficial for many people, though, to do both. It is not right for everyone, 100%. And I've told many people that I'm like, hey, I think we should wait. I'm not sure you're quite ready to microdose. I think we should do some of the physical work before we dive into this. And there's a couple reasons for this this is another big question. What should I expect when I start microdosing? I'm going to get to that here in just a few. So it can be very supportive for that. The other one take a guess here real quick. Perimenopause. So I think one thing important, and most physicians do not understand this, just by the way, even OBGYNs, OBs or GYNs and or OBGYNs, the real role that hormones have on our neurotransmitters. And as our hormones start to drop through perimenopause into menopause, how that impacts our neurotransmitters, our gut, and our brain. And it impacts all of those and much, much more. And I think that this information is starting to come out. I still think there's a lot of people who are jumping on this perimenopausal bandwagon here and don't really understand biologically what is going on here and really don't understand from a hormone perspective how much, as women, specifically women, hormones impact our lives. And I'm not talking about just our periods. I'm talking about our physical health. And by physical health, I mean do systemically our physical health, our cognitive health, our mental and emotional health, our gut health, and so many other things. And it's so important. And I also think so many people are also so hormone focused that, okay, but what are all the things that impact our hormones? And why are we not also looking at those? It's like the people who only look at your gut microbiome for your gut health. But it's like, okay, but there's also, what about all of our digestive enzymes? What about being in a sympathetic state all the time? Being in a chronic state of stress? What about toxin load? What about all these other things that impact our gut health too? So it's like we can't just look at one piece of our health and be like, it's this. It's like we've got to look at everything all together. Otherwise, we're going to miss. And we're just going to try and Band-Aid everything, which is essentially what the vast majority of functional health is right now. Why it's so expensive, why people are spending a small to a large fortune just on supplements and testing by itself, and also not getting the results that they really want. And we talk about this all the time of just looking at bigger root causes, looking at the body, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, like all of those matter, and we cannot separate those because they all work together. So why our body's not just our physical health, our body's not just our mental and emotional health. Our physical health impacts our mental and emotional health. Our mental and emotional health impacts our physical health. Trauma impacts everything. What about our financial health? What about our spiritual health? What about all of these things matter, and we need to be able to look at all of these things and be able to talk about all of these things, and or if we're not knowledgeable in these certain areas, refer out. And I think that a lot of people are also afraid to refer out when it comes to their practice. You know, we refer out to therapists all of the time, all of the time. Yes, we do a lot of work when it comes to mental and emotional support, nervous system regulation, trauma healing. We have a lot of tools in our toolbox. And, you know, having a good quality therapist, especially a trauma therapist, man, that's a really good combo to have between us and them. And why? Why would we not want people to have the most success that they can have when it comes to all of these things? So, you know, all of that's really important to look at. So microdosing can be very supportive of, you know, some of these hormone imbalances that are going on that really impact, once again, our physical health, but also really our mental and emotional health. Can be a really, really valuable tool. So those are kind of the areas that we typically often will see. And sometimes we just have people who are curious and, you know, are looking to dive a little bit deeper. You know, for me, the reason I got into psychedelics is I had done so much work. I had done so many different trauma healing modalities, and I had gotten a lot of success from a lot of them. And it came to a point where I just felt like I needed to access things on a deeper level. And I was really struggling to do that. And I didn't know how to access or tap into those things. And psychedelic work really helped and continues to help me do that. So that is another big reason why people will get into the space, be curious. So those are all things that can be really valuable. It is not right for everyone. And there's a few things that go into this. And once again, this is a question. Is it right for me? Is this something I should be doing? Should I try something different first? Like what are your opinions on this? So there used to be several years ago now. And once again, keep in mind that this space is on the newer side. And so we have some more indigenous ancestral type wisdom from using certain medicines. And we do have some clinical scientific studies. And by the way, there was a whole period of time where psychedelic research was actually flourishing in many areas. And then the government cut it off when the war on drugs came out. And I'm not going to get in, why did that happen in the first place? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. And I'm going to leave that side out of things. And in the last we can say decade, maybe even a little bit less than that at this point, there's been a real resurgence of research back into this. And initial research was very concerned with serotonin syndrome. And this was the belief that if you were on an SSRI, specifically an SSRI, that something that was tapping into your serotonin receptors, that it was not appropriate to either micro or macrodose with something that also impacted your serotonin receptors, which is something that psilocybin does do. It attaches to a similar receptor as many SSRIs. And so there was conflicting information of, is it safe to do this? Could we do more harm than good? What does this look like? And new research over the last few years has come out saying that it is actually safe, and that to get serotonin syndrome and have the negative impacts of that is actually quite difficult. And so, that's not really a concern anymore. So if you are on medication for your mental and emotional health of any sort, especially SSRIs though, it is actually deemed safe for you to microdose and or macrodose. There are certain it's a little bit different when you macrodose, and there are some different protocols and schools of thought when it comes to that. And I have my own that I feel like work well and are scientific based and also practical in nature. But when it comes to microdosing, very safe. And what I will often see is someone's microdose, that dosage that works best for them, is typically going to be a little bit higher than, say, someone who is not on them. That is not the case for everyone. Everyone is different. Every body is different. Every person is different. And I do like to set that expectation early on that, hey, most people are landing with their standard microdose practice between 0.05 to 0.1 grams. It's a teeny tiny dose. Versus someone who's on SSRI, they may land closer to anywhere between 0.1 to 0.2 grams. That, once again, not the case for everyone. Also, I never start there. And I also like to set the expectation that, hey, we may end up on a little bit of a higher dose as what feels best for you. And we're still going to start low. We're still going to start slow. And we're going to build this relationship with these mushrooms to understand what works best for you. So that's a big question of who is this not right for it? Another kind of aspect to this, and this is people are going to disagree in this space about this. And this is something that I do feel very strongly with. If someone is brand new to the space, meaning that they've never done any sort of journaling, meditation, breath work, therapy, they've never done any sort of work on themselves and understanding how to feel feelings, how to process feelings, how to understand themselves a little bit better, how to be more present, I'm typically going to recommend that we do not microdose. Here's the reason why. One of the most common side effects of microdosing is it helps bring up things easier. And what do I mean by things? So this might be emotions. It can help you process emotions. It can help emotions feel a little bit more surface level versus being like, hey, there is something going on right now. I'm not totally sure what is going on, but I feel like something's going on. Something's a little off, and I'm not totally sure what that is. And you need to spend some time. Maybe it takes days for that emotion, that feeling, that thought pattern to come up for you. And microdosing may help it come up easier and quicker. Be like, oh, this is what I'm working with, and now I can work with that. The reason why I typically prefer someone to come in with some tools is to make that piece easier, because because it can feel a little overwhelming when you're not used to that, when you don't have that kind of practice and or self-awareness. It can be a little overwhelming. And I've seen that with people microdosing. I've been in several microdosing groups myself, and I've certainly macrodosed enough, and I've done that mostly in group settings with other people, some who have had a lot of experience, some who have had no experience. And once again, for me, I am a big fan of kind of tiptoeing into this space, and I am very happy that I microdosed before I did larger journey work because I felt like I had additional tools and resources. I'm also very glad that I did a lot of other things before I came into the microdosing space, because once again, I could pull in all of those tools and resources that I had to help me almost make the microdose more effective and just have an easier time with it. So that's a big deal for me, and something I always ask about. What have you done in the past? What kind of work have you done on yourself? Have you worked with a therapist? Have you worked, have you done any, do you feel good with meditation or breath work or, any, I'd just like to have something, at least one thing, one tool, one resource, something. If we can have a few, even better, because I do see people get more out of the microdose who come in with some of those tools and resources already established. So that's a big deal. I talked about some of the other side effects, elevated mood, energy. Some people, depending on the strand, will impact their sleep a little bit. So that I am always mindful of that okay, what have you noticed? What are you noticing? And this is where journaling can be particularly beneficial when starting off with. And there are certain trainings in the psychedelic space that really emphasize the role of journaling in starting some sort of practice around this, because I do think it can be really helpful in understanding, all right, what am I actually seeing? What am I seeing at the different dosages and all that kind of stuff? So that can be super helpful. I don't think journaling is required, and I see a lot of benefit, especially if you're not super in tune. And just sometimes it's hard to keep track of all the patterns of things that are coming up and how you're feeling. In which case, doing just like a quick journal of just like, hey, I took 0.05 today. These are all the things that I felt. And then we're going to be able to kind of go back through that and start to see patterns. So I do like doing that. The other thing I really like, side effects wise, I really like to do is just keeping an eye on what dosage is doing what. So at very low dosages, like the 0.02, 0.03, someone may feel nothing, which is okay. Getting up into some of the higher dosages, for me, when I was initially playing around when I first started, and this is a really big side effect, is if you do a little bit too much, you'll get a headache. Super, super common. So that's something I'm always looking out for. Like if you did a little bit too much for you and your body, you might get a headache. You also could get a little overstimulated easier from that. And so I like to help people be aware. And once again, this is where brain-body connection kind of comes into play. And so I talked about the lion's mane that I like to use for the brain and increasing the neurotransmitter, neuroplasticity that goes into this and being able to form those new neurons and new neural pathways. I also like to use cacao. And cacao is a little bit more body-centered, specifically heart. So you get this combination of brain and body kind of feeling. And I like the cacao with this because it can be very, very, very grounding. Even at I take 1 teaspoon. And that is what I typically recommend people start with, is 1 teaspoon in their microdose along with 1 gram of lion's mane. So that can be really helpful. And there are many, many, many other stacks that are out there, and they can be used for different things. For me and my clients, I've seen that combo be super helpful and just really valuable in getting the desired outcome that we're looking for. So headaches can be a role in this. The other thing I think is very helpful to understand that most practitioners will not understand, and especially if you are doing larger journey work with psilocybin and or MDMA, please, if you have these issues, make this person aware and maybe do some of your own research if they're not very familiar with this. So mushrooms overall can be histamine producing and or high histamine. Now, I will say many of my clients who I work with on the microdosing side also have histamine issues that we are working on. And so, yes, you can still microdose even if you have histamine issues. And I actually have people do well with the full stack of the psilocybin plus the lion's mane plus the cacao, even with histamine issues. Because of it, it's such a low amount, a lot of people actually do okay. I do like them to have an antihistamine of some sort on hand, whether that's a natural or an over-the-counter kind of form, just in case when they first start. Once again, I start people at very low dosages, so it's not really a big deal. And the likelihood it's going to cause a histamine reaction at 0.02 grams, which is where I have most people start, slim to none. I also recommend people do it after breakfast if they have histamine issues. I typically like to do it before breakfast if I can, as part of my morning practice, my morning routine. And if I'm also having histamine issues of some sort for whatever reason, I'm going to do it after breakfast as well. So, and especially larger journey work. And I've personally run into this issue with one of my facilitators, and we had a little bit of a back and forth about this that did not go my way. I also was not leading this, which I totally understand where they were coming from. So in large dosages, in macro journey dosages, definitely can be high in histamine. And there are some different considerations that we want to take into account. And I think it's really important that if you have histamine issues, it's really important to take these into account, because I can tell you that I've worked with clients in person doing larger journey work who have had some pretty significant histamine issues, and there was no problem. We absolutely went into journey space totally safe, totally no issues whatsoever. And this is something most people don't understand. So I think that's really valuable and important, that if you are that person who has the issues, please try and work with someone who has the capacity to support you, or find someone who has the capacity to support you if you need that. Another big piece of this is, like protocol. Where do you start? How much do you do? Well, for me, mushrooms in particular, but I'll really say all plant medicines. It's really about building a relationship with these things. And if you're not like a very spiritual person and you want to like poo-poo that, I totally get it. And I can tell you it's a very real thing. And maybe it's not a relationship for you. Maybe it's understanding how your body responds to different dosages. It's very similar, but different kind of angles that we're coming at from this. If I want something that's going to support, let's say I have a really busy call day, and I want the energy. I also want the cognitive support with this, because it can very much help with focus, concentration, communication, clarity at certain dosages. I'm going to probably take closer to a 0.05 to a 0.075. That is probably where I'm going to land. If I haven't been microdosing very often, I'm probably going to do closer to like 0.04 to 0.05. I'm going to listen to my body. I'm going to ask my body, what would you like today? Would you like to microdose? 1. 2, how much would you like? And what does that really look like? And I've done this enough over the years that I get a pretty clear answer right away. And I can tell you right away, what would be most supportive for me. So it can help with that. And it can help just with the stamina and all that kind of stuff. If I'm looking for something a little bit more creative, if I'm looking to go into a little bit more of a creative space and be able to open my mind up and just allow a lot of creativity to flow, I'm probably going to do closer to 0.08 to 0.11. It's typically where I'm going to land for that side of things. Now, if I want just a general open experience where I'm hoping to help process something, kind of depends on what I'm trying to process. If it feels very deep, I may want to go a little bit higher, closer to that 0.1, 0.15 kind of range. If it feels pretty surface level and I need just maybe a little assist, I'm probably going to do closer to a 0.05, 0.07. So it's really, for me, I think understanding how you feel at all of these different dosages is really valuable and really important. And knowing that all of these things have value, but it's what's best for you and your body, and also having the ability to manipulate that, which once again, I just don't love the capsules because we don't have that. I like to be able to just have a powder, a ground up version of this, to be able to, I have a little cup. I actually have my little cup here with me. So if you're watching, I have this little cup that I use for microdosing. I have this tiny, I still have cacao of this, a tiny little spoon that I use to like stir it up and mix it up with. And this is the only thing I use to microdose. This is like, and it's only for microdosing. I don't do anything else with this cup. It feels very special. It was a gift as well. And so it has just special significance and meaning to me. So, by the way, you can just put it in tea or your coffee, or maybe not your coffee, mushroom coffee, if you're using a mushroom coffee, because it can make you a little bit more sensitive to caffeine. So I'll typically I'll do a little less caffeine than whatever my norm is at the time if I am microdosing. And I need to be I am still guilty of this, even after doing this for all these years, is that I can over caffeinate myself pretty easily because I gradually sip my coffee throughout the morning, like later morning, early afternoon, versus drinking it all just like a cup in the morning. I casually sip on it, and that can make a big difference. And I on more times than I would like to admit, I have overdone it on the caffeine, and I've just like way overstimulated, and I'm like vibrating and shaking. I might have a little bit of a headache, and I'm just over caffeinated. And it was just my mistake because I also microdose, and I just need to be a little bit more careful and mindful of how much caffeine I'm consuming. So that's a big thing. So being careful with your caffeine intake if you are a caffeine person. And if you're not, that's also something important to take into account of, do you feel overstimulated? I remember in one of the very first groups I was in, microdosing groups I was in, there was someone who was a teacher, and she already felt very overstimulated in her job, just like all of the time. And the microdosing for her specifically, because we were doing it a little bit differently, it wasn't specific measuring everything. Everything was kind of combined all together. So we didn't know exactly how much of anything we were getting, but it was causing her to be even more overstimulated, where I think that if she was able to measure it out specifically and do like a 0.02, like a lower level kind of dose, I actually think it would have been very supportive, or worth a try at least. And maybe I'm totally off base, and maybe it wouldn't have been supportive. But I do think for her, potentially it could have been more supportive because she already borderline was overstimulated, and maybe we weren't looking at the caffeine intake. Maybe we weren't looking at all of these things. So just something to keep in mind. So those are big questions I get. Let's see. 2 other ones that I want to cover here. The first one is, how long should you microdose? Do you need to microdose forever? Is this a short-term thing? What does this really look like? The answer to that is, it depends. And I know that's not everyone's favorite answer, and it is really the case here. So, for me, I microdose pretty consistently for about the first two years that I started, 2.5 years that I started microdosing. And I felt way better microdosing than not microdosing. And so I did. And it was recommended to me to take time off, and I tried it, and I was like, man, I don't feel as good. I really like how the microdose makes me feel, and I would really like to continue on with that. And so I did. And there you can get a little bit of a tolerance buildup. I'd say I did probably get a very mild tolerance buildup, where I was doing closer to like a 0.1 most days. Whereas now I've very rarely microdose right now, and I've only been recently called back into starting up. I took at least 6 months off and just wasn't called to this year. And I've recently started back here and there, not super consistently yet, because I also haven't been called to do it super consistently, but maybe once or twice a week. That I'm doing 0.03, 0.02, 0.04. I have actually not gotten above 0.04 yet in the last few weeks. And so, no, you don't need to microdose forever. Some people do find it supportive for a significant period of time. Other people go through, I don't know, like a 6 to 10 week period, feel really good because you do keep the new neural pathways that you made. and don't feel called to it ever again. For me, I knew when I was ready for a larger journey. I did larger journey work very consistently. I'm talking like every quarter for several years. It's been over a year for me now, or about a year since I've done a larger journey work. And I'm only now feeling called to get back into that space once again. I felt like I needed a break. I felt like I'll also share, and if you didn't listen to my episode about sharing more about my ayahuasca experience, that might explain a little bit, but also understanding, for me, it's like a new level of understanding and building different relationships with the different medicines and how they're supportive. And also the ayahuasca I experienced last year, that journey and I did 3 ayahuasca journeys and a Wachuma journey within a 7-day period, which is commonly how it's done, just by the way. And I did it in a safe space. I did it in people who could hold the space, like amazing people. And it was a very, intense doesn't begin to touch it. But it was a very intense journey that I'm still unpacking and have only pretty recently come to understand certain pieces of that journey and understand how it's been impacting my relationship with other psychedelics and why I have been called to take a break. So that is a real thing here. But some people don't need that. Some people like to microdose for a while. Some people don't. Some people like it for a short period of time. Some people kind of go on and off. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's what feels best for you. And that's the most important thing here. And then once again, this is where journaling can come into play and be very helpful when it comes to a lot of this. Another big question I get is, do I need support? Can I just play around with it on my own? Yeah, you can absolutely play around with it on your own. And I can tell you from personal and clinical experience, it is highly beneficial to work with someone for at least a short period of time. And I'll tell you, I still have teachers in this space that sometimes I'm working very closely with. Sometimes I just talk to every once in a while. And once again, it's what do I feel called to? What do I feel like I need? And because I have so many tools in my toolbox, I use those tools as I feel like I need them. And microdosing is one. My mentors, coaches, facilitators, friends in this space, sometimes I feel really called to work with them, whether that's psychedelic specific or not. And sometimes I don't. And not all of that is okay. However, for the first probably year, maybe even a little bit more, 1.5 years that I microdosed, I was pretty consistently working with a group, with a person, with different people, because it was really important to me to really understand and to get different perspectives. And there is something to be said working with someone specifically in this space. And for me, if someone is looking to get into microdosing, I do require them join a group for at least a month. They do not have to stay long term. They can cancel after a month. And I do require that month. And I'll tell you, the people who show up consistently and stay for longer than a couple months and once again, like show up, get the benefit. And the people who don't, and I've had plenty of people come into that group and just ask very specific questions about microdosing and not open up from more of like a mental and emotional standpoint. And they do not get the benefits, the same benefits. They might get some benefits and they're not going to get the same benefits. So I think that is really important to understand that there's a reason I do what I do when it comes to this for everything, and particularly in this space. So the group that I have is called Collective Illumination. Once again, I do require someone to have a call with me before they can hop into this group, but it's a very small group. And it's 2 kind of what I call open support calls a month of basically of, hey, these are 2 times where I'm going to be available. I'm going to be on Zoom. Hop on. I'd love to chat with you. If you have specific questions about microdosing, great. If you have anything else coming up for you, let's chat about it. It's a small group. It's a very supportive group. It's a very interactive type group. And we have some really interesting and cool conversations about all kinds of stuff in that group. We've really had a lot of conversations, and it kind of like ebbs and flows, but about religion and spirituality. And a lot of people have a lot of religious trauma. My partner and I talk about this a lot because he grew up in a very religious environment and has taken a turn into more of the spiritual side of things, while also keeping his faith, but also shifting that. And what does that actually look like? And I do think I would like to have him on the podcast at some point to share a little bit more about his perspective on this, because I do think it's really valuable, because I did not grow up from a religious background. And I can tell you that, I mean, just these conversations that we have in this group around all kinds of topics, so this one included, it's really fascinating. And there's a lot of religious trauma out there that, once again, microdosing for many people can be very supportive and helping to process. And what does that look like? What feels right for you? What feels real for you? How do we connect deeper with your body? And microdosing can be supportive in that arena. So yeah, that's a big one. So we do 2 open support calls, and then we also do a group energy healing session. And people come up and show up to that and just, hey, what's coming up for you? What feels real for you? What are you working on right now? And we'll kind of dig into that from a more energetic standpoint, and we'll do an actual like group session when it comes to that. And we get the group environment with that, but I do some individual work. So we get some individual messages as well. And yeah, that group is very special to me. And yeah, I'm such a big fan of that group and how I'm able to support people in their microdosing journeys. And once again, I have other clients, one-on-one clients, who also do journey work. And a lot of them are a little bit more, just it's different. It's different in what we're using this and how we're using it. So if you have questions specific about this and or larger journey work, and I also want to say that, another big misconception about microdosing, you're not going to have a psychedelic experience. You can live your daily life. You can drive a car. You can operate heavy machinery. You can do all these things that you normally would do, because you're not having anywhere close to a psychedelic experience. There's different levels of journey work. Microdosing is a teeny tiny amount compared to larger journey work. Depending on what mushrooms we're using, we're typically going to start at like a 1.5 and that's a pretty low end. Typically, most people, once again, it kind of depends on the strand. There was one journey I did, like a crazy high strand, that the psilocybin content was wild. And I started at 2.5 or 2. And that was like the lowest I've ever done at that point in time. I've also done 1.5 as a starting point now, but for other reasons. When you develop more of a relationship with these mushrooms, you also don't need as much oftentimes to be able to kind of peel back and dig in a little bit deeper. But that's another topic for another episode. But you're doing very teeny tiny amounts. I'd say 0.2 is a high microdose, 0.2 grams versus a 1.5. And most people land, once again, 0.05 to 0.1 grams. It's a teeny tiny amount. You need a special scale to measure it. It's also very cheap, the scales. So if you are interested in this, if you are interested in learning more about this, we'll put a link below in the show notes to a specific microdosing consult that is specific to microdosing. Obviously, we do offer free consults for other health and wellness topics as well. If you're interested in diving a little bit deeper, understanding your bigger root causes, what's actually going on in your body, and where you need to start in your own healing journey, looking at all the pictures and all the pieces all together. And microdosing can be very supportive for many. And so, yeah, if you're interested in doing that, if you're potentially interested in learning more about this, is it right for you? What might this look like? All that kind of stuff. Book your free consult with me, and I'll be more than happy to dive in a little bit deeper with you. Is this a good thing? Is this not a good thing right now? What might come up for you? All that kind of stuff. We can dig into it in that free consult. So we'll put a link below. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening. Hope you like the new setup. And super excited to have this set up and have it ready to go now. Thank you for listening. As always, please like, subscribe, follow. If it resonates, 5-star reviews really, really, really mean the world to us. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.